Okay, so I'm going to do a video on adding snow to roads. I've already set up a road here with textures on. Um, I did actually just remove them, but I will just add them back in very quickly because I was trying to play around with some different things. So let's do texture, image texture, not that one, I want the diffuse. Just plug that back into there just so we can see a texture on it. So I've got my texture on the road. It's already mapped out everywhere I need it to be, so you can see my UVs are all mapped out. This is a Giants texture from the base game, the US map, so I've just basically used that and then mapped out the islands accordingly to wherever I want them to be, right? One thing I have just noticed here that they may not be exactly where I want them to be. Okay, so what I want to do then is just scale them up slightly. So let's just move them up S, Y. We'll scale them GY. Maybe something like that. Might be a little bit too much. Let's do SY. Bring it back a little bit. Go GY. Bring it down. Something like that. There we go. That'll work. So yeah, now I have my textures mapped out correctly to my object for my road and everything, right? So that's good, excellent. We've got all that set up where we want it to be. Then we just need to paint in where we want the snow to be. For this, you will need to be running Blender version 3.6 or a variant of Blender 3.6. I'm using 3.6.8, but any version of 3.6 should work fine. And you will need to have the latest version of the Giants i3D exporter that has been redeveloped for Blender 3.6. It does have some issues when you click on collections. It gives you some different errors, but you can ignore those. Everything, as far as I know, still works fine. It just doesn't work with collections like it used to. But that's by the by. It's nothing to do with what we're going to do here. So painting on the vertex colors, we need to go into tools and we need to use vertex color. So we toggle the vertex color mode, which will turn that on, and then we can paint in our different values. If we go into the FarmSim 22 installation folder here under shaders, we're going to use the vertex paint shader for this. So if I open that up and we go down to line 217, we can see that we have some different values. So we've got RGBA, so red, green, blue, and alpha. I'm not going to look at the alpha value because that's something different, but the red, green, and blue values are what we want to look at here for the snow. So we have under the red channel opacity, so this is 0, not visible, 1, fully visible. Under the green value, we have softness, or green channel, we have softness, 0 for sharp transition, and 1 for soft transition. And under the blue channel, snow visibility, 0, no snow, 1 is with snow. So we can use those values within Blender to actually get the desired results, okay? So what we're going to do then is look at two different values here. Well, one value in particular, the difference between the sharp transition and the soft transition. The others are pretty self-explanatory. You have no snow or snow. You know, the opacity here, theoretically you could have any value between 0 and 1 because it's not visible and fully visible, right? So you could have 0.5, 0.6, whatever you wanted there, so that the snow would be more opaque. That could be interesting to play around with to see what you could do with that. But for this, I'm just going to use the value either 0 or 1 on all of these just to get the different sort of outcome for what I want. But as far as the sharp transition and soft transition, I want to show you the differences between the two of those. And it's quite important for me in this particular scenario because I have lines on my road. And you'll see what happens when I use the sharp transition, which will not work in this scenario. Okay, so we're going to have a look at that. So if we go with that, then we'll do this one as a sharp transition. So I want my snow on the road, so I want 1 for fully visible, 0 for sharp transition, and 1 for snow, with snow, okay? So I'm going to be using 1, 0, and then 1. Again, the alpha, just leave that at 1 for this, it doesn't matter. We're not going to be looking at that. Now, what I would suggest to do here is when you look at the actual object, is to color it using either the red, orange, or white, so that when you paint in your values, you will be able to see that they are painting, they are adjusting. Because if you use the value 111 for soft transition, so we have fully visible, soft transition, and with snow, that is a white value. 1, 1, and 1 is RGB for white. And if you use that value, when you paint it on here, you won't know if it's actually painted it or not. So I would recommend to use either the red, orange, or white to start with to color the whole mesh, so that when you paint your values on, you can see that it is actually changing. Okay, so I'm going to use the white value here, and I'm going to color the mesh. Now, straight away you're going to say, well, that ain't white. And you're absolutely right, it's not. It's an off-white, and I believe that has something to do with lighting. When you're using Vertex painting for lights, if you use pure white, it will look too washed out. So it's an off-white, so that when the actual Vertex paint is illuminated, if you like, it doesn't look so washed out. I could be completely wrong on that, but that would be my thinking behind the reason why it's not a pure white and it's an off-white. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that would be my thinking. You can always use red if you want to, so just do red or orange, whatever you want. I'm going to use the white or off-white, whatever you want to call it, right? So here then I need to determine where I want my snow to be. So I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm using lots of add-ons, so ignore this. This is just an add-on which gives me a pie menu, so I can choose whatever I want, face, edge, vertex, very quickly without having to go up to here when I'm in edit mode. So I can just do that very quickly and select my different values. But for you, just hit tab if you haven't got these add-ons. This is mesh tools, I think. Whatever, doesn't matter. Just hit tab, okay, and then make sure you're in vertex select mode up here, right? So you're in edit mode, vertex select. Then just choose what you want to put on here. So I would perhaps maybe say I want snow to be down the middle of the road. So if I do 7 on a numpad here to go top down orthographic, I can just box select all of those. And then I would probably want snow to be down the side, so I'm just going to shift select and box all of those, and then shift and box select all of those, like so. Then you might want to have snow in various different areas, but you need to be careful where you put it, because it will not just paint in these areas, it will bleed out from those vertices. So when you paint it, you don't want to start just going, I want snow here, because you can see it's all going to start to merge together. And before you know it, very quickly, all you're going to end up with is a road that's got snow everywhere. So you may as well just select them all and paint. Yeah, so just be a bit careful with where you start painting, because you can very quickly just add in snow everywhere, all over the road, and that's obviously potentially not going to be the best way to do it. So just be a bit kind of careful where you start selecting your verts, right? Unless you want snow all over the road, and then just have at it, like, but I don't want that. I want snow in certain areas, because this is a road, so I want to have it looking like the car or vehicle is coming down the road and it's kind of breaking up the snow somewhat and pushing it out to the center and to the sides of the road, right? So yeah, so here what I perhaps maybe will do is select these ones, just so there's going to be a little bit of snow in the center here, possibly. Or alternatively, what I might do is, instead of doing that, I might do it to the sides here. So it's not going to bleed too much into the center here. I might go out to the sides a little bit more. So we could say that it's bleeding in from the sides instead of from the center, whatever, right? So here what I might do then is do that one, and maybe this one, and then this one, and this one. We'll just go with that for now and see what it looks like, okay? So I'm going to go back into here, and for this then I want to have no snow, or snow. No, this is snow, right? So I want 101, which is what I've got here, 101. I'm going to set. So you can see that is where the snow is actually going to be. Potentially, there is a bit of a dynamic kind of effect to this. So it won't be apples for apples. It will be kind of like somewhat like this. But as the vertex painting kind of bleeds off at the end, the snow will become less, right? So it's not going to be, you're not going to have snow in this area fully. It will be full in the center and then bleed out to the edges, sort of thing. But that might be a bit too much. Who knows, right? We might think, okay, that's fine. Let's undo that then. We don't want this one. That probably won't work for what I want. So I'm just going to undo that one and undo that one. And then we can kind of go again. So we'll set, that might be a bit better. Okay, so we might come back and maybe say, okay, so I want maybe some here, right? We could have kind of that effect or whatever, right? So if I do this one, unselect that one, so we've got something like this. We've got a bit of snow there, perhaps, right? And you could do something like, let's do this one and set. So we've got a bit of snow here. It's not going to be completely empty or devoid of snow in these areas. And we could do that one and set. So it's going to be a bit there. Whatever you want it to do, right? It's up to you how you want your snow to be displayed on your road. So we'll go with something along those lines, right? That's how I want my snow to be displayed. So I'm going to do Control I to do an invert selection. So now then I want no snow, so it's going to be 0. I would recommend to do soft transition when you're coming from snow to no snow. So I would do 0, 1, and then 0 in this case, okay? So we're going to do 0, 1, and then 0, and set. So we would have this. So now we're going to have this kind of effect. So there's going to be no snow where the green is, and then where the kind of pinky color, whatever purple color, that's where the snow is going to be, right? So again, as I say, you can't really tell how it's going to look until you get it into game. You would have to kind of play around with it, put it into game, see what it looks like. You might have to make adjustments and then, back in Blender and so on and so on. But this is going to give you a fairly good representation of where the snow is going to be and where the snow is not going to be, right? Something like that anyway. We're going to go with that. So this is going to be my sharp transition, right? So what I want to do then here is I'm just going to duplicate this and make this a soft transition. So we'll rename this one to underscore sharp, right? And then I'm going to duplicate it. We'll just do Shift D, and then this one here is going to be underscore soft. So we'll hide that one, and we're going to go back into Vertex. I'm going to do Control I to invert my selection, so I go back to where it has snow, and then I'm going to do this is the soft transition, right? So here what we want then is 1, 1, and 1. So we want one full visibility on our opacity, soft transition for 1, or 1 for soft transition, and then snow visibility 1 with snow, right? So here then I'm just going to drag and type in 1 and set the RGB, right? So where the white is where the snow is going to be, and where the green is, there'll be no snow, right? This is soft transition. We'll see what the differences are between them. Okay, so we're going to just do that. We'll toggle the visibility off, and then we can update some things. So I'm just going to drag in like so. This one will do sharp. Then we're going to do the materials. So we've got our sharp material on both of them at the moment. So road snow test sharp. So under this one here, I'm just going to delete that, and we'll just create a new material, drag it in. As I've already done this, it's duplicating the materials, but that's okay, doesn't matter. So we've now got road snow test soft and road snow test sharp, or both of these. So if I then, because I've duplicated them, I know that the textures are all going to line up exactly where I've got them and everything, so I don't need to worry about any of that sort of stuff. We can always go back in the material preview. There's that one. We look at this one, it'll probably have nothing on it because I don't have the texture applied to that material. But that's fine, because it's a duplicate of this, I know it will work. Right, so under the sharp then, I need to delete that texture, because you don't really want to export out from Blender with textures on here. I find that it doesn't always work very well. So I always delete them, delete the texture node, and then just add the textures back in once you get it into the Giants editor. So yeah, so what I'm going to do then is let's go back into here under the exporter. I'm going to take the name from here. Fine. And then we're going to export it out. So we're going to uncheck this. Don't change anything here. Just uncheck the use blend file name. Go to here. Go to desktop. Create a new folder, and we'll just call it road. That'll do. Go to here. Paste. Set. We want to make sure that it's selected. Export selected. Then this one here. Go back in. Actually, let me copy the name first so I don't have to type it. That would be helpful. I'll go back in here. Soft. Set. Export selected. Okay. So let's close that down and that. We're going to the folder here. Let's do the sharp first. If we go into this one, we'll add in the textures. So we're just going to go here and data, maps, map US, textures, road diffuse, road specular, and road normal. And we want our vertex paint shader like so. And we're going to do train format, right? But you can see straight away that where I've got certain areas, they've been masked out, right? Because it's a sharp transition, I no longer have my lines down the center of the road, which is not really what I wanted to do. That's not really going to get me the desired effect that I want, right? So potentially here I could play around with that and add them back in. So I would basically come down here, and I think it's this one, default diffuse, because if you go into FarmSim folder, so if you go to here, 22 data shared, it's basically using this texture here, default diffuse, which is just a grid texture, right? This one, and that is what's being displayed on my road here. So if I had a texture with those lines in it, potentially I could add that back in again. But the problem I have here is that there's no way to UV map that, because my UV is set to the road texture that I'm using, and you can't UV map it to two different things. It's either one or the other. So this would have to be a separate object, and then the snow wouldn't work how you want it to work. It would just be a mess. So yeah, not sure on how that kind of works out. Potentially I could have this as a separate object, but actually joined to the road. So it's not part of this same mesh. It would be a different mesh, but it would be just laid on top of the road. And then I would be able to UV map it slightly differently, and that potentially could work. But for this, I just don't think it's really, what the way I would want to do it. To make this look like a road, though, if the line wasn't a thing, for example, you would then need to update this to, display some kind of road texture on it, because otherwise you're going to end up looking like this in game, which is not really going to work. So then what you would do is use this shared texture here, and then go into wherever to find what you want to do. So perhaps maybe go into maps, US, texture, terrain, and then come down to, say, this one here, and add that in so it kind of blends, right? You want a texture that's going to blend, but it looks really shiny though. That's the other thing. It looks really, in my opinion. So you have to be a bit kind of, yeah. But you do have like default normal and default specular here, and obviously the snow. So under this one here for the normal, I would then go back into this folder and then go to maps, US, textures, terrain, and then scroll down to wherever that is, main road, and use the normal map like so, which will help blend it in somewhat better, right? It's not quite as shiny as it was before, so it is blending in slightly better, right? And then we just play around with the values. So here what I would need to do then is change the values here. So under the UV scale, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, and that could blend it in even better. So you'd have to play around with those UV values, and that's what that is actually doing. Those UV scale values are for your mask, where you've painted in the vertex colors, right? So to blend it in a little bit better, you would just play around with these UV scale values. Then your snow scale is dependent on what you want to get out of it. So if you set that to 1, irregardless of where you've painted the UV, the texture paint in, it's potentially going to cover the whole road with snow. It's kind of a scaling factor from where you've painted the vertexes or vertices. So if I've painted the center row vertices, this snow scale is basically saying from the center here, or from the vertices, I want that snow scale to reach out a certain distance, right? So this is quite helpful, because if this snow is going out too far into the center here, or into the road from the center, you can reduce this value. The downside of it is that it's a global scale, right? So whatever you affect here will also be affecting where the snow is displayed other areas on the road. There's no way to individualize that. So you'd have to kind of play around with that value to get the desired effect that you wanted, or paint your vertices different in Blender, right? But if I found that, for example, that where I've painted my vertices in game, it was a little bit too overpowering, I could decrease this value, and as such, then my snow would not be, displayed quite so much over that area. It would not be scaling out from those vertices as far, right? But yeah, so you can control that a little bit here within the shader, but it is a global value, so it's going to affect every part of it wherever you've painted your vertices. Just bear that in mind. So yeah, we can do this. It will work with the sharp transition, but again, as I say, I'm going to lose my center lines here. That's the only downside of that, right? So I have to bear that in mind. How I'm going to do that would need to be different. As I say, I would potentially need to have a separate road section down the middle here, which would be UV mapped very differently to a different part or different texture or whatever else, to make that work, so that I could use the same texture as my main material as I would be able to use it here under the masking textures, right? Otherwise my road, my line in the road will disappear, as I've shown here. So that's the very large difference there between the sharp transition and the smooth transition, and I'm going to show you what I mean. Let's just go ahead and save that. We'll close that one down. If I now go to the soft transition, right, we'll do exactly the same here as I did with the other one. So we'll add in all the different values. So we're going to add in the road diffuse, road specular, and the normal. Then we can add in our shader. So again, the Vertex paint shader, right? So let's do Control L to add a light, and you can see we have all what we have. So now if I go to here and change this to terrain format, the lines are still there. They have not disappeared. And that's because I did a soft transition on this one, not a sharp transition, right? But I can assure you that the snow will still be in those same areas. It just won't be a sharp transition. And you can still play around the values. So here you would still potentially want to set this to whatever value for blending purposes and things like that. It's a little bit harder to see where the snow is going to fall under the soft transition compared to the sharp transition. It's very obvious where it's going to be when you're looking at sharp transition. So you may want to have two different roads, like I've done here, soft and sharp, so that you can compare the two together and get the different values correct for your UV scaling and things like that. Because otherwise you might find that your UV scale will be completely balked. But again, you can always put it into game, see what it looks like, and then if it isn't correct, you would then adjust the UV scaling accordingly, put it back in game, and obviously adjust it. But you can do that directly when it's in the map. So once you've imported it into your map, and then tried it out. If it doesn't look right, you can always then, you know, in the map that you've added the road to, adjust the UV scaling for that particular section of road and then load it back up in game and retest it. You don't have to keep re-importing it again. You can, once you've imported it into the map once, you can then adjust it accordingly as you need to once with it within the map. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so yeah, anyway, I think we're pretty good there. So what I'm going to do then is we'll adjust this to 600. I think that's the value that's used for that. We don't need to do anything different here. You know, these are not going to matter. If I was to change this to something else, so if I go back into here, we'll go map, US, textures, terrain, and then go down to the main road and add that in. Other than making it slightly darker and giving it kind of different effects there, which I think, in all honesty, is going to, you know, not do it justice. So I would just leave it as it is in, you know, under the shared texture, because you can't see it. So I would just come back into here and use the default diffuse. It's not visible, can't see it. So in my opinion, it doesn't really matter. You just leave it as it is, right? Like so, and that should be fine. In my opinion, anyway. You can do what you want with that, but yeah. So let's go ahead and save that again. Then actually, let me delete the light because we don't want that in the map. We'll go ahead and save. Close that one down. Let me just make sure this one's all set up correctly as well. So we'll go ahead and delete the light because we don't need that anymore, and we'll set the clip distance to 600 on that one as well. Be fine, and then we'll go ahead and save and close that down. Okay, so I've opened up a sample mod map of the American map, whatever that's called. Elm Creek, is it? I think it's Elm Creek. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're going to import the two roads, so I'm just going to go import. Let's go to desktop, and we want road, and we're just going to import these. So we'll just click like so. And what I will do then is I'm going to select this road over here and do Shift Control C to copy those values. And I'm going to take this one, and then we can do Shift Control V, put it over here. And I'm just going to drag it back somewhere like so, right? And then I'm going to do the same with this one here. So Shift Control V, then we'll just drag this one back as well. A nice flattish area so we can see the differences, what's going on, right? Now, already I've pointed out that using sharp transition will mask out any lines that you may have. So obviously that's a downside to using that particular method, but it does have its places though. You want certain roads to have a sharp transition, and you would, as I said before, potentially want to do this somewhat differently if you did want the lines to still be there, right? And potentially here, as I mentioned before, when doing this, you possibly would be able to reduce the opacity. So going back to the shader where it showed under the red value here, opacity, that may be something that could be reduced to make it more opaque, so that the line would then shine through or show through or whatever. That's something that I would need to play around with a little bit more to see what happens there. But you could potentially have sharp transition, but have the opacity slightly reduced. But you need to be a little bit careful with that because going back into the shader itself, if we look at the shader and look at the values again, the opacity is saying not visible at 0, fully visible at 1. So if you set the opacity anywhere between 0 and 1, you might find that the snow would not be visible anyway. I don't know on that. It's a bit, I've not played around with this enough to know fully what all the values do. Might play around with that a little bit here just to see what difference that makes with the opacity value on the sharp transition, to see if it does actually affect how the snow is displayed. But just be a bit careful with the opacity there, because you might end up finding that even though you've put one with snow, because your opacity value is too low, the snow still won't be displayed. Don't know on that as of yet. That's something that needs to be experimented with. But anyway, so we're going to go with this and see what it looks like in game. So obviously this is my sharp transition here, and then I have my soft transition there. So we need to know what's going to be displayed differently on each of them once the snow actually lands on the snow on the road, or falls on the snow. Once the snow is on the road, are there any discernible differences in how the snow is displayed between sharp transition and soft transition, right? So I'm going to save this and then I'll put it into game, and we'll see what it looks like, I guess. Okay, so we are now in game, and I have, let me just change something here a second. There we go. Better. Right, so I can see what's going on a bit better now. So sharp transition road here, and then obviously soft transition over here, right? So I'm using easy dev controls to speed up the time above what Giants allow, just so I can get through this a bit quicker to the desired seasonal period where hopefully we'll get some snow. You can see already we do have some, I think, there a little bit, but not a lot, because it didn't snow enough, but it might snow a bit heavier this time. There we go. Now we've got a bit of snow on the road, so let's slow that down just a little bit so it's not going to disappear completely. But you can see that we do have quite a sharp transition here of the snow, right? It is showing through very clearly, and this one is a little bit softer because it's kind of masking out certain areas. It's pretty much the same as that, but it's just a little bit softer. It's not quite so, you know, well, lack of a better word, sharp, right? Shows up much better here than it does over here. Obviously the lines on the road are going to mask that a little bit, plus the fact that it's still night. So what I will do, let's speed up time a little bit more. Hopefully the snow won't go away, but it might do as it gets round to daylight. I want to just see what it looks like, daylight values. So let's just slow that down again. So you can see there are some differences, right? Sharp transition, it shows up a little bit heavier here. Compared to the soft transition, it's not quite as obvious as it is on that one. You can see obviously there's a little bit there. It is going away already, even on the Giants' own roads. It wasn't a very harsh snowfall, so it's not going to be, you know, that obvious where everything is. So maybe what we'll do is speed up time again, just so that see if we get any heavier snowfall that might give us a bit more of a I don't know if that was any heavier snow than what we had before, but again, you can see the snow is on the road, right? So there are some slight differences there between the sharp and the soft, as I say. But with a heavier snowfall, it does show up a little clearer here. But you can still see the lines, and that's for me why I use the soft transition on this particular, in this particular scenario, because I still want to be able to see the road, the lines in the road when there is no snow. The fact that you can still see them when there is snow on the road is not the point. It's the fact that using sharp transition masks those out. So they would have to be done slightly different to make them still work the way I wanted them to work, right? But keep it one object, so I wasn't using multiple objects, whether they're joined together or not. It's still going to be separate objects. But we do have the snow. It is there, and all the rest of it. So clearly over my initial attempt, this is working way better than it did before, right? It is working, which is great. Just opens a few more doors, I think, when it comes to modding, to be able to add that into your maps and things like that, right? And have it working the way it's meant to work. Before, when it, you know, using the original i3D exporter, I could get snow on the road, but it was just random as to where it would appear. There was no rhyme or reason, you know, behind it. I couldn't specify in Blender where I wanted it to be, and then hope to actually have it appear there in game. It was just, you know, your luck if I got it where I wanted it to be or close to. But here now, obviously, you can see it is showing up exactly where I have painted it, or at least to within reason, you know, within a certain tolerance. So yeah, there's that, obviously. So what I want to do then is, just out of curiosity, I'm going to pause here, but I'm just going to go back into Blender and I'm going to redo this one, the sharp transition, but change the opacity so that it doesn't actually have full visibility on it, and just see what difference that makes to how the snow is affected. Because I think personally, if you set it to 0, so it's completely opaque, the snow won't show up, even if the lines do. But I don't know because I've not done it yet. So I'm going to have a bit of a play with that and see what that kind of what results I get from that. Okay, so back in game again then, and what I've done is actually set the opacity here for 0. So even though that is a sharp transition, and I can show you here if I go into Blender and go to the tools, I've actually set 0, 0 and 1. So my opacity is 0. My transition is sharp. My visibility is 1, which is full visibility on the snow. And I'll show you that just quickly here. If we go back into the shader, so if we go to shaders, Vertex paint shader, right? So if we go to line 217, you can see here that my opacity I've set to 0. My sharpness is 0, which is sharp transition, or softness is under sharp transition at 0. And my snow visibility is 1. So 0, 0 and 1, right? Which is what I've set it here in Blender. 0, 0 and 1. If we toggle the visibility on, this is what we get. Sorry about the phone. So blue is where my snow is going to be. Green is where my snow is not going to be. Okay. But if I go back into game using that opacity at 0, the snow is still there, but it's just more opaque. I don't know if that makes any sense. Again, the snow that's falling on, you know, the road here is not, you know, a massive amount. I think I would need it to snow a lot more than it did to see the full effect of it, but using a value of 0 for opacity does actually seem to work. And I'll show you if I go into here. This is the sharp transition. If I open this one up in the Giants editor, I do actually have this open in the map, but you can see that the lines and everything are still there as is, and I still have all my values, although I didn't change this to 0.2, but that doesn't really matter. You can see all of the values for the sharp transition are there, but I've used opacity at 0 instead of 1, and that has kept everything visible, as in my lines, you know. So it potentially is a possibility to use the sharp transition, but just have your opacity at a lower value, so that any lines you have on there are going to actually show up correctly when there is no snow. Again, it depends on what you're going for, right? If you don't have the lines there, you could do it the other way around, where you have the sharp transition, opacity at full, at 1, and then use the method of actually masking it out with various textures through here, or reduce the opacity down to 0, and that would still also work, right? So if I close that down, what I want to do is I'm going to go back into here, and I just want to change those values because they were actually not the same as the other ones. So what I will do, let's just Alt F4 out of that, and then we'll just roll down to here and change these values to 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, and 0.2, all right? So they match this road here, and then I'll go ahead and save that, and then we'll load up the game again, just to double check that that is actually, you know, what difference that has actually made. Let's just minimize all of that. We can close that down. Close that down. So let's just go 22 and we'll just load it live here. No pausing. I don't particularly like to pause the videos so you can see exactly what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, but it does make the videos quite long sometimes, so just have to go with it, I guess. But we'll just load it up as is, and then hopefully we'll be able to see what's going on. I don't know what difference that potentially would make with the UV scaling changed from 0.5 to 0.2, but we'll see. Let's go back over to here. I'm going to use EasyDev just to make it easier to run faster, and we can then have a look. So yeah, you know, I wouldn't know that that's actually made any difference in all honesty looking at it, but potentially it has, you know, by adjusting that UV scale and you know, going from there. So we do now have snow on both sections of the road. This one is the soft transition, this one is the sharp transition, but using that opacity value and setting it at 0 has kept my lines visible, which is really important. So in this particular scenario, as I say, because I want obviously the lines to be visible. So yeah, lots of different values to play around with there, and you know, it will take a little bit of experimentation here and there to get exactly what you want out of it. Again, here what I will do, just to, you know, for the sake of science and all that sort of stuff, what I'll do is I'll change the value on the sharp, and I'm going to change the snow scale on this one and set it to 1, right? But we'll keep this one at 0.6 just to see what difference that makes. So we'll just save that just so we can you know, see what's going on, and we'll just load back in very quickly and see what we end up with here. So let's just back in. And as I say, my understanding that snow scale is just basically saying from where the vertex was painted, how much do you want me to scale out from there, right? So you might find that that particular road section is now got a lot more snow on it than it did previously because of that adjustment that I've made. Where is it? Run multiplier, there we go. Let's turn that on. And there you go. Now you can see obviously it's made it much heavier than it was before. It's scaled it out, but from all values. So every vertex that was painted, it's scaling it outwards from every single one of them. It's a global value. So you can't like specify you want it to be more in the middle, scaled out more in the middle than you want it on the edges. It's going to scale it out from every vertex that was painted equally, you know, according to that value. But it does give you a little bit of adjustment. You know, it gives you a little bit of adjustment directly within the editor, in Giants Editor, so that you can have a play around with that. You know, this might be the effect that you want to go for, but that could be quite difficult to actually paint down without creating a really high poly road, adding in more verts to the road section to be able to get that specific value directly with vertex painting. So using that scale value, you can obviously adapt it outside of Blender to get a different effect, right? And you can play around with that all day long. So, you know, I could perhaps maybe say that might be a bit too high. So let's go 0.8 on this one, right? And then we'll save that. And just very quickly to the end of the video here, see what that looks like. And then we'll end it there. But hopefully what I've shown in the video will give you an indication of what can be done and how it can be done. You know, changing small values can make a big difference, but you don't want to necessarily do that by increasing your poly count on the road. Don't start adding, you know, lots and lots of loop cuts everywhere just to get more vertices, so that you can be more specific with how you want the snow to be displayed. Try and do that with the values within. Yeah, there you go. So that looks pretty good actually, like that, right? So from the vertices that I painted, I'm able to adjust it slightly to give me more snow here. You know, so the car's coming along here and getting rid of some of the snow, but not all of it, right? So you can make small adjustments there, but it is very dynamic. What changes you make there potentially could be massive or nothing at all. You know, there will be a little bit of experimentation there that will be required, changing those values incrementally until you get as close as you can to what you are looking for, right? So don't expect to, you know, don't expect miracles from it, because it can't provide those, I don't think. Not that I know of anyway. This is Farming Simulator after all, right? It's great and all that, I love it, but some things can be quite quirky at the best of times. But I think, you know, what Giants have provided is fantastic, you know, giving us this ability to actually have the snow on the roads now. You know, kudos for that. But yeah, just play around with those values. You know, paint down best you can in Blender where you want those, where you, on your vertices where you think you want the snow to be, and then you might have to adjust them slightly with that scale value and various different things to get as close as you can to the design effect that you're looking for. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.